Hello humans, welcome to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. It's time for another physical media pickups collection update. I'm sorry, the cat is wandering around here somewhere. Little Rosie not been very well for a couple of days. I think she did something to her mouth. She was a bit miserable yesterday, but I think she's perking up today. So she's joined me here in the cinema room for a new physical media, because she said to me, if you're doing a physical media video, I want to be there. So she'll probably see her backside and her tail wandering into shot in a moment or two. So yeah, I thought I'd do another update now, because I've had a few new bits and pieces since the one I did a fortnight ago. And that was a very long update, so I didn't really want to leave it that long until I do the next one. So I'll crack on and do this new one tonight. It now being Monday the 8th of February. I hope you're all well. As we work our way through the misery of February. January was bad enough. February's, still a bit grim. But, hopefully brighter days are coming. Right, okay. Physical media pickups, usual stuff. It's Blu-rays and 4Ks, comic books, collectibles, bits and pieces. I'll do all the physical media sort of Blu-ray stuff first, because I know a lot of people are interested in that, maybe not so much the other stuff. So the bits that I've picked up, you saw last week that I had Dune on 4K. I did a special unboxing video for that, which is that way somewhere, or that way somewhere if you want to have a look at it. I also picked up on these flash sales on Amazon. Thinking it was like 14.44 or 11 something. I can't remember now. It's one of the classic cinemas, The Wizard of Oz. Classic film that made a superstar of Judy Garland back in the 30s. Over the years, I've had it on video, I've had it on DVD, I've had it on Blu-ray. But it's nice now to have the 4K version of this. Apparently, it looks stunning on 4K for a film that goes back to the 30s. I think that's not a bad recommendation. So I'm looking forward to watching this again. Haven't seen it for years. It's one of those ones people used to joke was on every Christmas on the BBC. But it hasn't been on for a while. I haven't seen it for ages, and it'll be nice to see it again in 4K. As you can see, it's so new I haven't even taken it out of its shrink wrap yet. So we'll do that now. And to do that, of course, I'm going to require the assistance of the murder scissors. This is my murdering scissors, incidentally. It's not really, as I keep saying, my murdering scissors is much bigger than this one. I'm joking, of course. So anyway, let's take this little creature out of its cellophane. This came, I think, in a week or so ago, but it just went straight on my shelf. It's fascinating, isn't it, watching somebody taking a disc out of a piece of very stubborn cellophane wrapping. God, why do they do this? Anyway, yeah, it's The Wizard of Oz. It's Judy Garland off to see the Wizard with the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and all those other fab favourites. And it is a classic film. This is obviously the sort of ultimate edition of it on 4K. And I'm looking forward to seeing it again, because it's been years since I saw this one. Anyway, there it is. There it is on 4K. There's the back, if you want to have a little look at what's there. Loads of special features. And inside we have nothing special in terms of art on the disc. It's just the 4K disc itself, which is red, and the fairly standard sort of Blu-ray. But it's a nice little set with a nice slipcover, and it's a classic to be revisited. Right, that's that one. Yeah, there's a couple of interesting ones in terms of the way that I came by them. I go to, what supermarkets still stock physical media. I think Tesco's are giving it up next month. Sainsbury's have already got rid of it. And I think we've just got Asda and Morrison's. I don't think they're going to be long for this world in terms of stocking physical media. So, at the end of the day, it isn't selling to the general public. Collectors and specialists will always want this stuff. But if the man in Tesco's isn't buying it, Tesco's ain't going to stock it. And I think streaming and all the online services have just taken that sort of need to collect away from people. But my local Asda has been selling a few things rather cheaply lately. Oh yeah, I was in my local Asda week before last, I think it was, and there's the usual bits and pieces in there. They had one little shelving area which had a few 4K discs that were on sale for £5. There were three altogether, three titles. So I picked a couple of them up, and I picked up 1917, which is Sam Mendes' terrific one-take war film that came out a couple of years ago. This was, in fact, the last film that I went to see before all this pandemic stuff started in 2020 before the lockdown, I remember going to see this in my local View cinema. So it's the last film I saw before the world closed down for a while. But it's a great film, and it's a very powerful film if you've not seen it. And if you want it now, as I said, I'm just unwrapping this again. This is on 4K now in Asda for a £5. Certainly in my local Asda. I would imagine it's in a lot of other Asdas as well. You open it up, you've got the disc with the image from the film. That's the 4K disc, and Blu-ray's got the same sort of disc on it. Now, the interesting thing about this, and I must admit I have done this once, I picked up a copy, £5 for my collection. I discovered that a trade-in at CEX gets you a voucher for £8. So I bought another one, took it to CEX, got myself an £8 voucher to trade in for something in the future. Because it's silly to turn down a deal of something like that. They also had, which I picked up, I had it on Blu-ray, but I didn't. I thought I had it on 4K, but I didn't. This is, to me, Christopher Nolan's best film. This is Dunkirk. This came out in 2017. This is his retelling of the true story of the Dunkirk evacuation. Astonishing, true-life wartime story. It's a superb film, and whatever you say about Christopher Nolan's films, I find his films cold. Basically, I just find there's not a great humanity in his films. But this works because it's a true story. It's beautifully put together. It's very evocative, very engrossing. And as I say, for me, it beats the Batman trilogy. It beats Tenet. It beats everything else he's done. It's my favourite of his films. Again, this is a £5 at the moment. It certainly was until last week when I was last in. I had a £5 on 4K. The trading value in CEX is a £5, so I didn't pull the same stunt there. Also on sale for that price is Darkest Hour, which is the film starring Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill. I didn't pick that one up. I've got it on Blu-ray, but I didn't think it's a film that's really going to benefit much by being in 4K. I like 4K for spectacle, for a film that needs that extra sort of high definition image, if you like. So I don't tend to go for sort of more dramatic films in 4K. I don't see the point in upgrading. Also then in CEX, I did have a couple of vouchers. And I redeemed those I went to visit a friend of mine in Port Talbot in West Wales last week. Popped into the local CEX store there, and I had a couple of vouchers, and I redeemed that additional 1917 that I had. And I picked up a few bits and pieces from one of my vouchers, a couple of my vouchers. I still got one or two left. A couple of interesting oddities. I wanted to show you this one first of all. It's called The Gift. This stars Jason Bateman, stars Rebecca Hall and Joel Edgerton. It's the first time I'd seen Joel Edgerton. I've become more aware of his work since I've seen this film. This is a really interesting thriller. This came out in 2015. And Jason Bateman and Rebecca Hall play this happily married couple who have a chance encounter with a chap played by Joel Edgerton, and he sort of seems determined to become their friend. He's paying them visits and he's leaving them gifts, trying to ingratiate his way into the family, for reasons that we find out as the film goes on. It's a twisty-turny thriller. It's the sort of thing you can imagine as one of those 6-part BBC Sunday night thrillers, but it's very tightly plotted. I do like Jason Bateman, and it's very well, very highly recommended if you've not seen it. I think it was a couple of quid in CEX. I didn't have it, so I thought, yep, I'll have that one. Thank you very much. I also picked up, this was a couple of quid. This is Quarantine. This dates from 2008, stars Jennifer Carpenter, who many of you may recognise as Deborah Morgan, Dexter's sister in Dexter. She even appeared in Dexter New Blood, despite the fact that her character was killed off. But I won't spoil that for people who haven't seen the series yet. Please catch up with it. This is a remake of a Spanish horror film called Wreck. Sort of found footage. You remember those found footage films that were all the rage a while back? This is sort of in that vein. It's about a group of security guards and security people who break into this building which has been locked down because there's some sort of viral infection. It's a sort of a zombie horror type film. I think the Spanish version is better, but Quarantine isn't bad. There was also a sequel called, I think it was Quarantine Terminal, but I wouldn't bother with that. But this isn't bad, and I do like Jennifer Carpenter. I also picked up on 4K for, I think in 10 quid vouchers, Whiplash with Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons. I saw this a few months ago. I I think it may have been on BBC Two or on the iPlayer. I'd heard it was a great film, hadn't got around to watching it. It is a great film. This is a terrific film about Miles Teller as an amateur, an ambitious young jazz drummer, determined to join up the elite music conservatory that's run by Terence Fletcher, played by J.K. Simmons, who is terrifying. His teaching methods are terrifying. He rules by terror. He's a monster, basically. And it's sort of how they sort of bounce off one another, and it doesn't exactly have the sort of how they learn to respect one another, I think. It's quite bleak, but it's a very good film. The performances are absolutely fantastic. And I do believe it won Academy Awards for 3 Academy Awards, and J.K. Simmons quite rightly won the award for the Best Supporting Actor. Really good film if you've not seen it. And I also picked up a TV series I'd forgotten about. It was on Fox, I think it was, back in many years ago. Good, I think 8 years ago maybe. I can't remember the year it came out. Dracula, starring Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. I think it was planned to be a returning series. It was on Fox, which of course no longer exists as a channel. A very opulent and lavish series set in the Victorian era, 1896. Dracula comes to Victorian London as Alexander Grayson, a handsome and charismatic American industrialist who maintains he wants to bring modern science to Victorian society. But it's all about him trying to ingratiate into society for the reasons that we know from our knowledge of Dracula, and to exact revenge for a wrong that was done to him years ago. Really good series, far better than the Stephen Moffat Mark Gatiss BBC series a few years ago, which was a mess. This is very atmospheric, very powerful. Totally forgotten about it. I just saw it in CEX, 2 discs, £3, and I thought, yeah, thank you, I'm having that. I would like to rewatch that. So yeah, so that's all the that's all the Blu-rays and 4Ks and stuff. So if that's your interest, go away now. But if you're interested in the rest of the stuff I got, hang around, because I've got some more bits and pieces to come. Right, there's always a few comic book bits, so I shall display those for you now. I think I mentioned these last time, the comics that my friend Tim had sent me, and I didn't have them with me when I did the last video, so I thought I'd show them to you now. This is an interesting comic book, which is a collection of Ditko's monsters. Steve Ditko, of course, is the legendary comic book artist who co-created Spiderman with Stan Lee and did loads of work in the early days of Marvel. One of the great comic strip artists. This is a collection of strips he did, pitting 2 of the lesser monsters of British horror and sci-fi fantasy films of the 60s. Congo, which is a great film if you've never seen it, it's so funny, and Go-Go, which is sweet, bless it. I haven't read it yet, so I can't say how it reflects those films, but it's just, I just love the innocence and naivety of this beautiful artwork, Steve Ditko artwork. She's back. Here she is. Yeah, it's a lovely little book. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it. The classic era of comic books, which, as I've said before, is my era. It's the stuff that I'm sort of interested in, the stuff that I will gravitate back towards. I also had 2 of these British compilation things, which I think must be from the 80s, 70s, 80s. I think I did look at them, actually. I haven't taken them up properly yet, but this is Creepy Worlds, number 169. It's marked as 15p. Rosie, you're not helping. She's a monkey. Yeah, so let's have a little look at this one. It seems to be black and white reprints of some very old sort of horror stories. Again, only just taken them out of the packaging, so I can't tell you much more about them. In fact, I think I did look to see if there was a year on a publication year. I think it says, no, this published by Alan Class & Co Limited, Dingley Road, London, but it says it's 15p, so clearly sometime in the 70s, early 80s maybe. Interesting, so sorts of lots of little short stories. I noticed there's even a text story in there. So the Creepy Worlds number 169 and Astounding Stories number 129, also 15p. I don't remember these titles, funny enough. I mean, I read and collected a lot of comics in the 70s, but as I may have mentioned before, my interest sort of disappeared late 70s after about 5 years of collecting. I think I started work and I was in, I don't want to sound offensive to comic books and comic book fans, but I was in a more sort of mature environment, and I just sort of lost interest in comic books. I became more Yeah, I just lost interest in comic books. But it's only in the last few years, really, with the arrival of the MCU and comic books becoming more high profile, perhaps, that I started looking back at some of the old comics, but only the old comics. As I've mentioned before, I'm just not a fan of modern comic. I've tried some of the modern comics. I've picked up those Marvel Select editions that come out. You probably see them in the supermarket. Whenever there's a new Marvel film or TV series, Marvel or Panini bring out a omnibus of that character, and some of the modern stories just don't do it for me, which is why I picked up a Superman in the 60s, which arrived on the weekend. This is a nice 242 page collection of Superman stories from the early 1960s. I think there's one from 1968, but again, it's this sort of charming, naive, sort of simplistic stories, but just good fun. And what's interesting about this volume, there is one story which hails from 1964. It was published in 1964, but it was actually written and due for release in 1963. It was about Superman meeting JFK, who of course was assassinated in November 1963. That was never published, or wasn't published at the time. They shelved it, but there was such a demand for it that they published it as to commemorate JFK, to sort of honour his memory and his achievements. So it's quite nice to see that. I didn't know anything about that particular story, that particular era. So it was quite nice to see that they've published that in here. I haven't read these yet. It only came a few days ago. But I will. It's one of those things I'll just leave on the table in the cinema room and pick up and have a little read. I also collected Decades, Marvel in the 60s. It's another 258 page thing. Again, classic Superman comic story, Spider-Man comic stories from the original. Mainly Spider-Man meeting other characters from the MCU, such as Doctor Strange, the Human Torch, the Hulk, Daredevil. Stories from various eras of Spider-Man's history, collected in this nice softback edition, again from eBay. There is a bit of crossover with this one. This is Amazing Fantasy Spider-Man Volume 1. Now, I don't know if I showed you this one before. I've got number 1, and in fact, number 3, which also came in the last month or so. I just wanted the early Spider-Man stories. Now, I've got those essential collections, but they're all in black and white. I thought I'd quite like to have them in colour. So this is a hardback Marvel Masterworks Volume 1, which collects some of the early Spider-Man stories. I think it's Spider-Man's 1 to 10, and Amazing Fantasy 15. Again, with the great art by Steve Ditko, and of course Stan Lee's groundbreaking sort of early tales of Spider-Man. It's just beautiful stuff, really nicely reproduced. And then Volume 2, these things seem to come out in different editions. This is a paperback edition of Volume 2 with a different cover, same sort of format, and it's got the original covers of the comics on the back, but it's just a different sort of print, different style of magazine. And this has, again, at the moment, I think I've got editions that cover the first, here we are. I think it's, these two which I had. That one, which is Volume 2. No, that's Volume 3. And this is sort of a softback edition of the Marvel Masterworks one that I've got in hardback. And this is Volume 3 from 1965, which collects numbers 20 to 31. So, yeah, I think these 3 volumes, this is 1 to 10, this is 11 to 19, and this is 21 to 31. So it's the first 31 issues of Spider-Man reprinted in colour. And I said I wanted them in colour because I did pick up some of those essential collections, but they're in black and white, and I think I have read some of them, but just wanted them in colour, really. Nearly there, a few collectibles. Doctor Who fans, the Eaglemoss collection have released their 2 new figures, which arrived last week. The Raston, a warrior robot, which you'll remember from the 5 Doctors in 1983. This is the robotic gatekeeper creature that the 3rd Doctor and Sarah Jane encountered when they were on their way to the Dark Tower. This thing that sort of leapt through the air and fired these arrows. I was reading the magazine that went with the figure. It had to be a cheap design, so it was like a silver suit with a silver helmet and some metal rods. And the robot was played by a dancer called Keith Hodiak, who just jumped in the air, then he edited it to make it look as if he was sort of teleporting. It's quite a clever effect. That's the only actual action sequence in the 5 Doctors, but it actually works quite well because the warrior robot meets up with a troop of Cybermen and does that to them. This is the impaled Cyberman. It's a charming little figure. It's a Cyberman from the Five Doctors in the throes of being destroyed by the Raston warrior robot. And quite interestingly, they've got the little javelin speary thing, which goes in a little hole in his chest so you can impale him again and again. Marvellous. So that's the two latest figures from Eaglemoss. Eaglemoss carries on, incidentally, if you're a fan of the collection. I think we were expecting it to end at issue 220. I think it's on about 212 or something at the moment. But they've now announced that it's going to go until 250, which means probably another 3 years worth of figures. I'm in two minds about it because there are just so many of these damn things. I've got hundreds of these things all over the house, various places on display and some in boxes. And there's the extra large figures as well. It's nice in that they are a representation of, when it finishes, it will be a fantastic representation of the history of Doctor Who's creativity. But there are so many of them, and a lot of them I could do without. But hey, they are what they are. I'm going to carry on collecting them. From eBay, I picked up 3 more figures. These are more Marvel figures from quite a hefty, whereas the Eaglemoss ones are sort of a bit lightweight. These are a bit heavier duty. These were £11 for 3 figures, and I have my eye on them because they're sort of contemporary figures. This is fairly timely. This is a figure of Moon Knight, because he is, as you probably know, the next Marvel character to appear on TV in the upcoming series starring Oscar Isaac. Now, I don't know much about Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight was just appearing in Marvel Comics when I stopped reading them, so I don't know much about him. But the trailer for the series looks good, and I thought it'd be quite nice to have a little figure of him. As I say, it was one of 3 I got for £11. I also got the figure of Blade. It's not the Wesley Snipes version. It's Blade from the comics. And again, I can remember Blade, the vampire slayer, a vampire killer from the comics. He's coming up soon in a new film starring the brilliant Mahershala Ali. But this is a nice little figure. And again, it was part of this little deal of 3. The third one, I haven't taken out the box yet, but I will take it out the box to show you guys. I don't know if I'm going to keep it because it's not exactly obscure, but I'm more to keep the hero figures. This is Taskmaster. I don't know a lot about this character, but you will remember that a version of Taskmaster appeared in the Black Widow film. A lot of people weren't hugely happy with that characterization, but I thought it was quite good. But that's it. It's a nice little figure, but I'm not sure I'm going to be keeping it. But it was the Blade and Moon Knight figures I was particularly after. This was just third in the deal. And finally, something I didn't show you last episode because I just forgot about them. I put them to one side, meant to show you them. Basically, it's 4 Doctor Who fridge magnets. I know, I show you any old tap. I picked these up off eBay for a few quid, 5-6 quid. These are images taken firstly from 2 series of Doctor Who Nestle milk chocolate bars that came out in the 70s. There's one from about 72, which was Doctor Who with an exciting cartoon story on the wrappers. The story, I remember it well. Doctor Who meets Master Plan Q, which the Master brings a dinosaur egg back from the past and hatches it, causing chaos. A very simplistic story, but I think it was on like 12 wrappers. You had to collect each one. And then in 75, when we had the new Doctor, Tom Baker, they did another series. And there's Tom Baker and Bessie. John Pertwee and Bessie there. These were just, I think, images of the main characters, the Doctor, Sarah Jane, Harry, Brigadier, and so on. Just an individual wrapper, so it wasn't a story as such. And the other 2, Sugar Smacks did a Doctor Who promotion in about 1972. You could pick up the boxes. There was a badge inside. You had a selection again of different badges unit. The Dr. Joe, the Brigadier, various other characters, the Master. And Sugar Smacks, which don't exist anymore, sadly, they had John Pertwee, sort of, on the box. And the last one was TV Action Comic from 1973, or 72, 73, which did these beautiful Doctor Who comic strips, the classic age of Doctor Who comic strips starring John Pertwee. This is one of their full-length stories, The Threat from Beneath, with the Daleks emerging from under the sea. I got those last time, but I forgot to show you them. So that's my pickups for this last 2 weeks. I don't know if there's a lot coming in the immediate future, so it might be a while before the next collection of things. But I hope you've enjoyed this little look through stuff I've been buying. Oh, just one thing I want to mention. I just wanted to recommend something. In a previous physical media update, so I completely blanked then. In a previous update, I think I might have shown you a book which I'd just picked. It might have been the last one. I've just today finished reading this. It's called Moths. It's by a writer called Jane Hennigan. It's her first book. It's independently published. It says at the back it's printed by Amazon, so it's a self-published thing on Amazon. This was recommended to me by a friend of mine who works in the media, and she spoke very highly of it. So I picked up a copy of it, and I've sped through it in about a week. It's a sort of dystopian post-apocalyptic book with a feminist sort of slant to it. Now, when I heard about this, I thought, is this for me? But it's actually very, very good. The basic story is that a sort of breed of moths appears from somewhere in South America, spreads across the world, and when it infects men, only men, it turns them into raging killing machines, like zombies, but not quite zombies. They have moments of lucidity, but basically they're sort of savage killers. And the story is sort of, part of it's told in flashback, part of it's told in a contemporary time in 20 odd years after this has all happened. 40 years after it's happened, actually. Society has collapsed, but is slowly being rebuilt. And if you're familiar with things like The Handmaid's Tale, which is about the oppression of women in a dystopian society, this is the flip side of that. It's not so much the oppression of men, it's sort of men being protected by women and being used for recreational purposes. A lot of men who have been infected are being kept alive. And the lead character, whose name is Mary, she lost her son and her husband during the before, as they call it, and she becomes involved in not exactly a conspiracy, but she discovers that perhaps not all hope is lost for mankind when she hears of a possible vaccine, and she gets involved in the plot to overthrow this slightly totalitarian society that is oppressing men. It's a fascinating book. It's really well written. It's very readable. I thought it's going to be a sort of an anti-men diatribe, because as much as I agree that there needs to be equality with men and women, sometimes the message is sort of delivered with a sledgehammer. But this is done a little more subtly. I particularly like there are scenes which flash back. Characters are sort of explaining what happened when they were younger, when the apocalypse happened, and those bits are very vivid and very readable. But the whole thing is very readable. It's written in a really nice, readable style. It's interesting. I mean, as I say, it's independently published, and I was reading it, and there are a few little things where you think, if it had been edited by a professional publishing house, there would have been little things that might have been tidied up. But it's a very good book, highly recommended. I give it a 9 out of 10 because I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a sequel called Toxic, which is coming out in July, which I'm looking forward to. So if you like your dystopian fiction, your post-apocalyptic type things, run to Amazon. It's available on Kindle. I picked this up for, I think it was £9 because I still like a physical copy of the book. Very, very highly recommended. While I'm on the subject of books, before I go, one of my upcoming videos will be about another book, but it's a book I've written. I'm not going to say any more at this stage because it's not launched as such yet, but I have written a book. It was something I was doing towards the end of last year. I don't know if I mentioned it on this channel. I know I certainly mentioned it in the podcast that I do with my friend Scott, but this is coming out fairly soon. As soon as I know when it's coming out, I will shout about it here, because hey, what's social media for if not selling yourself? Doctor Who fans might be of interest because it's sort of Doctor Who related. Anyway, that's coming up in a video which will be the next couple of weeks, I would imagine. I'm just waiting on the official release date. Right, that's me done for now. Hope you've enjoyed this little update, which I think has probably gone on a bit longer than I thought. Thank you for watching, and until I see you next time, you know what they say. You've got to keep taking the stuff.